Yeah.
And it was interesting, Patrick, over the course of the last 4.5 years of doing this assessment specifically, discovering for myself that I was neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a process, right? Because here I am, I married a man who I knew going in, dating, that he was autistic, ADHD. And so my son, who was diagnosed autistic, who was assigned female at birth, and just thinking about, okay, so here it is here on this level, here it is here in this level, and I'm like sandwiched in the middle, like, okay, let's take a look in the mirror and see what might be going on for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking at how difficult social relationships were for me, how I had a script and a plan for making friends in high school. Yeah. And so what is autistic burnout? Folks who are autistic can identify that maintaining a conversation, a two-way conversation, not just information sharing, more of that, reciprocity happening, or being in groups, especially with people who are unfamiliar, trying to navigate all those social dynamics, and also the masking that comes along with, yes, I fit in, I'm just like you. And it's not necessarily conscious. Sometimes it's just like a survival mechanism. And so whatever that support looks like, reaching out for that is so important, and being able to not only prevent burnout, but then also address it once it's become an issue. And there are different scripts that we can learn and we can use to help accommodate ourselves and advocate for ourselves so that other people can accommodate us.
Yeah. How can I manage everyday life? Like, okay, Dr. Blied, everything that you're saying sounds fine and great, but I still need to get to work on time. I still need to turn in this assignments, right? And so one of the main tips is routine. Create routine and structure. And ADHDers, autists, we all do better with routine.
All right, welcome to the Mental Health Toolbox. Today we are bringing back our resident expert on neurodiversity, Dr. Monica Blied. She is a clinical psychologist and will be sharing with us her tips around neurodiversity and how to thrive in a world designed for neurotypical people. And specifically, we'll be talking about how to avoid burnout as a neurodiverse person. So stick around. We have lots of great information rolling through today. If you're not familiar with Dr. Blied, she is a clinical psychologist. She has dealt with chronic health issues herself and has had to learn all kinds of strategies to cope and thrive despite what life throws at us. And she's also the creator of Faces of Health, a wonderful online resource for mental health and tools there. And she is also going to be launching a new course. In addition to that, she is also an expert in testing ADHD for adults, something that's pretty hard to find. And she's based out of Claremont, California. So without further ado, let's say hey to Dr. Blied. How's it going?
Hello, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me again, Mr. Martin.
My pleasure. So nice to have you back on. How's your week going so far? I know it's only Monday.
So good. Yeah, I know it's Monday, but the weekend was good. Actually, today is my husband's birthday.
Oh, well, thank you for making time, especially in light of that. Great. Well, those who are familiar with our podcast are no stranger to all of the nuggets of wisdom that you have and that you're going to be sharing with us around neurodiversity. Curious, what, off the top of your mind, do you feel best describes what a neurodiversity person or condition looks like? Like, how would, for someone who's not familiar with that language, what is that? What does that encompass?
Yeah, so neurodivergence or neurodiversity means that there's something different or a variance from what's typical in neuro, which is our brains. And so a neurodivergent person has a unique brain style that often also comes with differences in how the brain is structured and how the brain is wired and how we see or approach the world. So neurodiversity includes folks who have ADHD, folks who are autistic. Some people include dyslexia or a variety of mental health conditions like bipolar as part of the neurodivergence movement. But typically it's seen as the folks who have ADHD or autism or different learning differences.
Thank you. That's very well said. I know it's a lot. It can get confusing sometimes. A lot of language gets thrown around. Even ADD and ADHD sometimes, I think, it's not very well understood by the general public what the difference is, and sometimes it's used interchangeably with adults, with children. And can somebody have ADD without having the hyperactivity? What does that look like? Do adults have ADHD or is it just ADD? There's a lot of, I think, that going on. When we talk about this stuff.
Actually, one of my clients said that I don't know if it's a primary care, their psychiatrist actually said, oh, you can't have ADHD because you're not 5 years old. Like, what? So ADHD and autism, they are neurodevelopmental disorders, which means they are conditions that you are born with, even if they're not diagnosed in early childhood due to various factors, due to, most often the person is twice exceptional, meaning they're also gifted intellectually. And so that can hide or mask a lot of the features that they may be actually struggling with. Or they may have high anxiety and just want to please adult figures. And so that can come off as, oh, this person is not having a lot of challenges until they leave the structure of their family environments and their, parents kind of, having everything routine. And then they're on their own and have to make their own schedule and those sorts of things. And so a lot of young adults who are going to college are first diagnosed with ADHD. And, you mentioned like ADD versus ADHD. As of, I think it's been over a decade now, our diagnostic manuals changed where we're no longer using ADD. It's like, it doesn't even exist anymore, but it's still in our common language, but it doesn't exist. It's only ADHD. But there are different presentations of ADHD. And so there is ADHD predominantly inattentive type. So that's what we used to think as ADD, without the hyperactive. Or there's the predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation. Or there's combined presentation where you have prominent symptoms or features of each, where you're, as an adult, you have at least 6 of a list of features. And as a child under 18, you have at least 5. And so part of the assessment process is saying like, okay, well, do you meet diagnostic criteria? Meaning, do you have, some of this, these lists of features or symptoms? And is it impacting your life? Because maybe it wasn't impacting your life before because mom and dad or caregiver made sure you got that homework done no matter what, even if it's 4 hours, or maybe it wasn't impacting your life before because for autism, for example, you had a set of friends who were like from childhood where the parents always set up play dates. And so you had that familiarity, but now you're in a new school. Or now you're trying to adjust to college or married life. And, the two are coming together and there's a child. There's so many different variances that can help to show someone for the first time, like, oh, wow, like these things are a challenge for me and they're not a challenge for other people. That's usually what I'm seeing. That people are just like, oh, this is not common. I didn't know that other people, didn't struggle with getting to places on time or they could actually write an essay in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours, or they could read a book chapter without having to read and reread the same paragraph because your mind went somewhere else. And so that process of understanding that, yes, you're different in these ways, and you're not alone in these ways. There is a culture, a community of people who also have unique brain styles who can relate to you. You're not weird. You're not an alien. You are a beautiful piece of diversity of what we need in humanity to have those differences and have those different perspectives.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for kind of fleshing that out for us, because it's so nice to see some of the language changing, some of the semantics around how we talk about these things from an empowered perspective, the twice exceptional, right?
Mhm.
That's huge. I think that's a huge shift from what we've seen.
Yes.
And there's still a lot of these preconceived notions, I think, even for the stigma around accepting a diagnosis in general, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
We know that it's just the language we use to try and understand something from a clinical perspective, but there's definitely a real impact in society when we start looking at these conditions through the lens of a diagnosis. You were saying that things have changed in the DSM, which we know the DSM as professionals is just a compass, right? It's just to give us an idea of what we're working with, so we know how to approach things. I mean, you saw that with Asperger's, right?
Mhm.
That was pretty much next. Now it's like pervasive development disorder, but nobody's going to walk around saying pervasive development disorder. Say Asperger's.
Yeah. Or, Asperger's, where it's like autism light, but no, that's not, that's not it, right? It's part of the autism spectrum now,
Mhm.
where autism is not just, and part of the spectrum is, but it's not just individuals who, didn't talk, or use expressive language until the age of 5 or 6, or, couldn't tie their shoes on their own until they were 12, individuals with higher support needs. I think that is the stereotype that we have of this is what autism looks like. And we're just seeing this very narrow slice of the autism spectrum, where really, we have autistic individuals who have lower support needs. They're mild, but still significant. And so, for example, if you can, be integrated into a typical classroom and get good grades and all these things, but have a hard time deciphering emotions on faces and facial expressions, that's a significant support need.
Oh, for sure. Because how much of quality of life is impacted by these subtleties in society, picking up on the nuances, the social cues, how the impact that has on somebody who is trying to integrate into a new stage of life, a new chapter, be that high school or even college, and the impact that has on one's self-esteem if they feel like they're not, quote, fitting in, right? Or what am I missing? And people may not say anything to them, but they'll still treat that person differently. They may not invite that person to the event, or they may not play with them on the playground, or they might just kind of tolerate them, but not even tell them, hey, what's going on, or this is what I meant. And there's that, like you said, you leave one structure, you go to another, but the other environment isn't necessarily established to help that person learn the, quote, social rules or how things are done. And so they're just kind of left to figure things out for themselves.
May not be as accommodating.
Not as accommodating, for sure.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you touched on, Patrick, is really important about how it impacts self-esteem. And so typically the folks that I'm seeing in my practice are, 15, 16, 17, up to like 40, 41, 42. And their self-esteem is so impacted because it's like, I don't understand what I did wrong in this situation, why I just lost this friend, or why I've been excluded, as you mentioned. And I'm trying my best
to fit in and to do what they do and what is expected, what I'm trying to perceive as, what is expected, trying to do my best to fit within the mold, especially individuals who are assigned female at birth. We're taught at a very early age to fit in, to not make waves, to all those things. And so when we think about the very high co-occurrence rates of depression and anxiety in folks who are neurodivergent, from a life experience perspective, it makes sense and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in working with clients, like you said, with that slice of the spectrum, that's it's not quite autism. It's not even, sometimes I've had clients that aren't quite Asperger's. It's more like a pragmatic disorder, but it's just enough to make it hard for them to get the answers they need, to get the direction they need, to not blame themselves.
Yes.
As though they're doing something wrong. Why aren't they likable? Why can't they hold relationships? Why don't they X, Y, and Z? And so they take that on themselves. And like you said, that they certainly lead to depression for a lot of folks. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why assessment, like getting the answer, getting the diagnosis, can be so empowering, because now you have an explanation finally for your experiences, that, my brain works differently. The way that I see and perceive the world is different than typical society. And now I can move on the path towards self-acceptance.
Owning it.
What I need in these areas, and accepting myself for who I am and how I was made.
Absolutely. Strength-based. And that's why I am so grateful for the work that you're doing. Because not only are you helping people get a roadmap for where they're at, but you can give them clear tools, right, to thrive moving forward, and how they want to be empowered, right? What that looks like.
Yeah.
There are resources, right?
Yes.
To learn how to thrive. And I think because, like we were talking about, a lot of people who are neurodivergent, they aren't taught these tools, right? Because maybe they just weren't in an environment that was equipped to teach them these tools, and they have an unfair disadvantage, right? Because they aren't playing with a full scope of how to do life on life's terms, right?
Yeah. They weren't taught these tools, or what they were taught is fit in. What they were taught is change yourself. And so part of what I'm teaching in the online course that I created is like, no, we got to shift from changing ourselves to fit this mold to constantly doing these mental acrobatics to try to figure out, how do I fit in, to adapting or changing your environment. Change your environment to accommodate your needs versus changing yourself, who you are as a person. It's so powerful when we can experience that pivot.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, Patrick, over the course of the last 4.5 years of doing this assessment specifically, discovering for myself that I was neurodivergent. So it's been a process, right? Because here I am, I married a man who I knew going in, dating, that he was autistic, ADHD, diagnosed in early childhood. And so it's his son, my stepson. And I started to get, as I'm doing these assessments, started to get more familiarity about what it looks like in individuals assigned female at birth. And so my son, who was diagnosed autistic, who was assigned female at birth, and, just thinking about, okay, so here it is here on this level, here it is here in this level. And I'm like sandwiched in the middle, like, okay, let's take a look in the mirror and see what might be going on for myself. And so looking at how difficult social relationships were for me, how I had
a script and a plan for making friends in high school. You know, I told my my friend from high school this, like, hey, the first day I said to people who look friendly, hey, can we meet at lunch so that I could have someone to talk to at lunch? And
Mhm.
she was actually the only person who showed up. And so she ended up being my friend. But, you know, that planfulness, you know, where social communication is not organic, but
Mhm.
there's more kind of structure and logic to it. That's part of the autism spectrum.
Mhm.
Back to when she didn't come to school, how I would just hang out in Miss Andrews, my math teacher's class, because the rest was hard and there was a lot of anxiety around it. That's part of the autism spectrum.
Yeah. You see
And
that a lot. Absolutely. So kind of those are the things as a practitioner you know to identify. But if you're living it, all you know is this feels safer.
this
This
is
is yeah
part
easier.
of
Yeah.
my life. Yeah.
Hmm.
And not realizing that like other people didn't have those same struggles. Um, and now that I know, I'm better equipped to empower others and to support from not just professional training, but from lived experience and marrying those two together to like, okay, let's see what's going on for you and what is not. Maybe it's
Hmm.
not autism, maybe it is, you know, social anxiety, maybe it is rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is really common in ADHD, you know,
Hmm.
but oftentimes what I'll see is it's both because there's a very high co-occurrence between ADHD and autism, like myself, like my husband, like my stepson, like my son, you know, where you have these folks who can have these conversations, but if you go back and analyze what the mechanics of that conversation, it's usually more one-sided or information sharing and not necessarily reciprocal in building upon
Hmm.
conversation points that are shared by both people. And so that's the fascinating part of assessment for me. Discovering that for people, putting the puzzle pieces together so that they can have, like you said, a roadmap for this is how I am, this is who I am, and this is how I can move forward with in ways that protect my energy and my peace, in ways that benefit me, in ways that lower the levels of self-criticism and anxiety and depression and the things that can come along when you don't know or you know but you don't know how to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And that just speaks to kind of the topic for today, right? We're talking about managing stress. You were just saying a lot of understanding the self and understanding how to thrive as a neurodivergent person is translates as stress management. So you don't have that risk factor. It's not as high for becoming depressed, right? Because things are you're swimming upstream, right? And it's
Mhm.
not working. So
Yeah.
how does a neurodivergent person or somebody on the spectrum manage burnout? What does that look like? And as a expert in this field, it's your bread and butter. Like when you're working with clients, I'm sure a lot of the work you do is about mitigating the stress, right?
Mhm. Yes,
Thriving
absolutely.
with this
Yes.
condition.
And even going from surviving to thriving to flourishing, that's where
Hmm.
we want to be, right? And so, what is autistic burnout? Folks who are autistic can identify that maintaining a conversation, um, a two-way conversation, not just information
Hmm.
sharing, more of that, you know, reciprocity happening or being in groups, especially with people who are unfamiliar, trying to navigate all those social dynamics and also the masking that comes along with, yes, I fit in, I'm just like you. And it's not necessarily conscious. Sometimes it's just like a survival mechanism.
Hmm.
Those things are exhausting.
And so if you go to a party or to a social networking thing and you're doing your thing, and then you find that like the next few days you don't want to talk to anyone, like let's sit in silence. Let's do our favorite activities together, like parallel play. That's a sign that, that burnout is present. That exhaustion, that burnout is present. And yes, if not taken care of after a while, it can lead to a depressive episode. And so I do have some specific tips for burnout prevention tips. So how can you help when masking and compensating and trying to assimilate and all that are so exhausting that you feel depleted? It's the 5 S's. It's actually created by Dr. Joy Lawrence with Neuropsychology, Neudle, in 2023, the 5 S's. So neurodivergent individuals need to prioritize healing and take a break, whether through respite or support from family and friends. So the 5 principles or the 5 S's are: number 1, stop. Stop, slow down as much as possible. So say no. Or, even classroom environments, if it's a young adult who's in school, to include or reduce contact with people. And so some people can feel guilty or be made to feel guilty if they are secluding themselves. But again, this is part of our ability to move from survival to survive, first of all, surviving to thrive, flourishing. And so it's for a specific amount of time to be able to recover from all the work that it's hard work for our brains to do these social and mental acrobatics to try to fit in. And then engage in special interest for regulation. So my special interest is, I'm not sure if you guessed it, but neuropsychology.
Yeah.
Doing this work, but then also nature. And so watching nature shows, just anything about animals, whether it be in the deep sea or on the coast or in the air, that is so calming. So finding what your special interest is.
I love the painting behind you. It makes me want to take a walk in the forest.
Yes, I love it. Yes, anything that has animals and no humans, I'm like all for it. Finding what that is for you, whether it be, some sort of media entertainment or video games or crocheting or, whatever it might be. Special interest, that's the 3rd S. Stimming, which is a regulation through motor movement. That's the 4th, because that actually helps to engage our vagus nerve, which calms our body down. 80% of our parasympathetic nervous system, or our body's relaxation system, has the vagus nerve involved. Then getting support. So it can be support through community. It can be support through, do a plug of the ADHD Autism online course, or whatever that might look like. There may be, I always say, like, find your people. And so there may be a person where they get it, they understand you, and you're able to, Joey, Joey.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And neuropsychology, Neudle.
Great.
Yeah. And so whatever that support looks like, reaching out for that is so important, and being able to not only prevent burnout, but then also address it once it's become an issue.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. What wonderful tips. And I also like, it gives oneself permission right?
Mm.
When you understand that this is part of a self-care plan. If I need to take some respite after a social engagement,
Yeah.
rather than frame that as social isolation and a bad thing and a sign of depression, say, this is part of my self-care plan. I'm an introvert. This is okay. This is self-care. And
Yeah.
this is what I do. So if I'm going to commit to something, I need to be very careful about what I'm committing to, that is of high importance, right? And that my follow-up plan is not to commit to more things because I feel obligated, but rather
Yes.
to make sure I have respite time afterward.
Yeah.
Right. And if I'm going to engage with other people, it needs to be, like you said, paralleled, right? It's like, okay, I can have company, but understand, I'm going to be doing my thing. You can do yours, you're welcome to hang out.
Exactly. Let's do our homework together. Or,
Yeah.
I'm on my phone scrolling and you're on your phone, but we're still at that togetherness. But it's not that extra energy required to engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being strategic about how we expend ourselves.
And also something, that part of that respite care and that self-care plan is creating a buffer zone around those social engagement activities where you buffer yourself before and after. You have to be in draining environments, draining meaning where you have to mask or camouflage, or there's too much sensory input, sensory overload, or too little sensory activity. And what that means is you have your special interest or some sort of pleasurable activity that you do before, one purpose, intentional, and then that you also have planned to do right afterwards. And so you kind of sandwich this unpleasant experience, or it's just unpleasant. I was going to try to find a different word.
Call it what it is.
With pleasurable activities. And so, your brain, your body can handle it much better.
I'm glad you highlight that, right? Because it is kind of a catch-22. We know that we don't always want to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, right? Avoid avoidable suffering. We talk about that. But we also know there's value in investing in relationships and investing in other people. And even if that is outside of one's comfort zone, there's still an inherent value, right? It pays dividends in the long run. And yes, one could be a hermit, but and as an adult, you might have that option. As a child, maybe not so much, right?
Yeah.
But as an adult, you might have that option to be a hermit. But is that what best serves you?
Yeah.
And so to some extent, it sounds like as best you can, learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to a point, because it improves your quality of life, but you can also plan ahead, right? To be better prepared, right? And to increase what we call your distress tolerance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You encapsulated that so well. The way that you articulated that, I'm like, yes, that's what I meant.
That's great. Yeah. I'm so glad we're talking about these strategies, and normalizing a lot of, again, what the stigma is around being neurodivergent and what we would just normally call ADD or ADHD or autistic, and taking away some of that negative spin to it, right? Just saying, look, this is just another way of being. It's who we are. It just means that it's like being a left-handed person in a right-handed world, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make you less of a person. It just means that, wow, there should be more right-handed, accommodations.
Yeah, left-handed accommodations. Yes.
Or left-handed, yes. See?
Yes.
Yeah, go right to right-handed. But yeah, absolutely. So wonderful that we're having this talk and raising awareness. I appreciate you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
So we talked a lot about how a neurodivergent person thrives, right? In light of stress through the 5 S's. Any other practical targeted tips you would give somebody who struggles with maybe people interaction, or even explaining, like, because I see this a lot when working with clients, is how do they explain, or how much do they disclose to other people in order for the other people to help accommodate them, right? I think that those nuances really can increase anxiety for a neurodivergent person. People invite you out, they want you to do things, But it's against your grain, maybe to that extent. Like, what are there social scripts? Is there something that you teach your clients to use in order to be diplomatic about it? Should they be diplomatic about it? Should they just be direct?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there are different scripts that we can learn and we can use to help accommodate ourselves and advocate for ourselves so that other people can accommodate us. And so it could be, fully disclosing like, hey, I have ADHD or I'm autistic, or it could be talking about the ways that ADHD shows up for you, and I'll give an example of that, or your autistic features show up and how people can accommodate. So for example, with ADHD, sometimes people have a hard time maintaining friendships because they might, impulsively interrupt in conversations, like, because it's like, the idea is here, it's on the tip of my tongue. And so they could say like, hey, sometimes when we're talking, it seems like I'm interrupting you. I promise you, I'm not trying to be rude.
I was like, you feel like it's flying away. You're trying to grab it, right?
Yes, I'm so excited and in tune with this conversation. And so, show me a little grace, right?
Oh, likewise. Yes.
Yes. For an autistic person, it could be that having multiple conversations going on at once in a room is sensory overload. And so they could say like, hey, it's hard for me to focus on this conversation when there's a lot going on around me. And so let's have a quiet room. Or it's hard for me to, feel calm when there's a lot going on around us. And so when we're not talking, I'm just going to have my noise canceling headphones. And so it's not to tune you out, but it's to be even more in tune with you and our connection. That's how I can best accommodate.
Yeah, that's great. And people really respond to consideration. When you say to someone, I hear what you're saying is very important to me. And I want to give you my undivided attention. Can we go somewhere where it's a little bit quieter? That goes light years in terms of building quick rapport with other people. And really that's at the core, right, of when we're talking about some of the social challenges with neurodivergence. It's that rapport building with people that's sometimes lost on the front end. A lot of, you can make up for a lot on the back end once you have a backstage pass. Speaking to Goffman, once you have like a backstage pass to somebody's life, right? When they give you that, that transparency, they're already invested in you. But how do you build that rapport? How do you get that upfront investment in people? You do it through respect, right? But if one is socially anxious and one is afraid and they don't have the words, they don't know the script or how to address this with other people, they might just sit in the corner with their headphones. And to someone else who doesn't know that person would make assumptions. Oh, they're antisocial. Oh, they're self-absorbed. Oh, they don't want to, participate.
When that's the case at all.
They're excluding us. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And so what you're doing is, finding ways to align with your values. If your value is to be in relationship with others, and then also to nurture those relationships. And part of it comes with your own confidence. And that's part of what I'm, trying to ingrain and, encourage within the online course is building that confidence and starting by affirming that autism and ADHD, they're not disorders to be cured or removed. They are not disorders to be cured or removed or deleted. They are evolutionary adaptations that serve essential functions in our society and in humanity, essential roles like for civilization. Much of the dysfunction that we experience is due to having to navigate these environments that were just not designed or built for us. They were built for the neurotypical brain, how a neurotypical or an allistic, a non-autistic person views the world. It's not because of inherent deficits within us.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of, the work could also be like remembering that you're not alone and that your differences, your different brain style, the way that you view the world, the way that you, pursue your special interest, that's what makes this world works. That's what makes this world work.
Oh, absolutely. And we could, I'm sure, make some assumptions and name some names about people who have made incredible contributions to society that have changed the world for the better for everyone.
Yeah.
Just about, because of their hyper focus, because of the way they're wired, right? And that's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing when you can find what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and then find a way to share that with others, with the world.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that what we're all trying to do anyway?
Yes, in some ways, right? And so
in some way, right?
Discouraged and, depleted of ourselves. But, you and I may not win a Nobel Prize for what we're doing, but how can you impact your corner of the world? Sisters, cousins, brothers, friends, colleagues, classmates. How can you impact your corner of the world with showing up authentically?
Absolutely. It's kind of, like if what's the meaning to life is to find out what's meaningful to you. What's the purpose of life? Sharing what's meaningful on purpose.
Yeah.
Something to that extent.
Yeah.
Right. And I think sometimes when we have a social challenge or something that doesn't quite jive with our environment, right? Then the challenge becomes how do we become more of ourselves despite the environment?
Yes, right. Authentically and unapologetically. And it is so hard. It's so hard because we are conditioned, and I'm speaking specifically to US culture, but we're conditioned to not break the mold, to fit in and look one way and act one way, and that's rewarded. It's rewarded with promotions. It's rewarded with, kind of pat on the back, like, you've done a good job. It's rewarded with social acceptance. You're a part of this in group versus the out group. And so to be outside of that is difficult. And once you're there, it's so worth it. So worth it.
Absolutely. So then I would imagine if we're talking about adults and neurodiversity, thriving to some large extent, if we're not trying to fit into a box, if we're not trying to necessarily conform, right, then it seems like the inherent goal would be autonomy. How do we become more autonomous so that we can thrive in our own right and not have to stifle or conform, right? Or dim our own light in order to appease others, right? Or be more accepted. How does that play in terms of our approach to life, right? In terms of executive functioning and strategies.
Yes.
How does that conversation go typically when you're coaching?
Yeah. How can I manage everyday life? Like, okay, Dr. Blied, everything that you're saying sounds fine and great, but I still need to get to work on time. I still need to turn in this assignments, right? And so one of the main tips is routine. Create routine and structure. And ADHDers, autists, we all do better with routine, but ADHDers sometimes it's just like, okay, I need a little variety in my routine, or else I'm going to get bored, so even incorporating some variety, but having a routine and a structure using a planner, whether it be in your phone, like everything is in my Google Calendar, right? Or a physical planner, but that's a huge thing.
Also, you can use tools if you're in school, like Speechify or Audible for books.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very hard time. I have a bachelor's, first generation college graduate, a bachelor's degree, 3 master's degree, and a PhD. And I had a very hard time getting through any school books. Very hard time.
I don't feel alone.
It wasn't until I was 37, like way past graduation, that I realized that I'm ADHD, right? And so I thought it was something wrong with me. But when I got to becoming a professor and listening to books, I'm like, dude, I could have probably accomplished so much more if I had these technology assistive devices way back in school. So looking up that, there's something called Sunsama or Notion, which are like planner apps.
Mm-hmm.
There is Otter, where you can translate from like video lectures to actually being able to see it written down. So it's like a transcription, but then it also categorizes and summarizes it. That's huge. Having a place for everything and everything in its place is very important for executive functioning when you often lose things where they are, And so the best gift that I ever got was my Apple Watch, because I phone several times a day. And so it has a thing to help me find my phone, things like that. Using the Pomodoro method, which is having an undesirable activity that you need to do. So it could be like reading a book or completing an assignment or writing a report for work, whatever it is, but you're using timers. So set a timer for you to do that activity, and then have 10 minutes of free time, playtime right afterwards. And so you're structuring your pleasurable activity with your undesirable activity. And basically you're training your brain that actually it's not that bad and I can get through it. And you're also giving yourself an immediate dopamine hit using our neurochemicals to help you stay consistent and grounded and be able to complete that activity.
Absolutely. I love that message. Absolutely.
Speaking of our brains, using grounding, using somatic or body-based mindfulness practices instead of, trying to like get your mind blank and, think of nothing. That's never going to happen for most people.
I tried. I haven't tried that.
But I can use progressive muscle relaxation where I tighten up different muscle groups and then release them. Or I'm thinking about, okay, what are all the colors that I see in this room right now? What are all the sensations, using all 5 senses, those grounding techniques? And then finally, and I know it's like a long list of things you guys
this is great. This is great.
Later, but finally allowing for stimming, walking, pacing, doodling, fidgeting. That actually all helps our brains focus better and process information in a more effective, efficient way.
Yeah. So stemming, can you define that? That's a term that I don't think is well understood.
Yeah, so stemming is self-stimulatory behaviors. So it's usually some sort of body movement where you are like, fidgeting with a object in your hand, or you are tapping or walking. And when you're tapping like this, one side of the body, then the other, or when you're walking, pretending this is my feet, one side of the body, then the other, that's called a bilateral movement, one side of the body, then the other. And it actually helps to integrate the 3 main parts of our brain: our thinking brain with our emotion brain and our body-based brain, so that, again, calming happens, but also enhanced processing and being able to get to the solution for that creative endeavor or the, main thesis for the essay that you want to write. It's a remarkable thing
that our bodies naturally do, just pace when we're anxious, or walk, or we learn this in therapy to do this butterfly tap that helps to calm down. And science shows why it helps.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. A lot of these skills we talk about don't necessarily understand why they work.
Mm.
You know, so appreciate that very much. Wonderful, wonderful tips and a wonderful conversation. And thank you for sharing that. Now, for those who want to dive deeper on some of these concepts, you have a new course you've rolled out, yes?
I do, yes. And it is available now at learn.facesofhealth.net. Is for ADHD and autism. And there are 5 modules, and it's really designed for the busy. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page there, you click on the ADHD autism course. At the bottom of that page, you'll see specifically that course, empowerment, right there, empowerment through understanding. And so I hadn't told you yet, Patrick, but I wanted to share that for your viewers, I actually have created a promotion. You can get 20% off the course by using the promo code Mental Health Toolbox.
Oh, well, that's fantastic.
And that's good now through April 15th, through tax day. Mental Health Toolbox, all one word, all lowercase.
Gotcha.
If you want to redo that code on the screen, lowercase, Mental Health Toolbox. And so it's 5 modules, and it's split into videos that are 10 to 15 minutes long. It's easily digestible. It's designed for the busy adult learner. And there are also 3 ebooks. So it is adaptable to different styles of learning, whether it's audio or visual or looking at books. All of that is included. I talk about what is it like to get an assessment? What can you expect? What are the diagnostic criteria? And modules 3 through 5 is how can I flourish? How can I live with neurodivergent self-management skills, executive functioning skills? What are whole health and whole person support options? So I am so excited about this. It's about a year in the making. And yes, I actually have contracted with a college where they are providing this to all their students.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so as far as like enterprising and licensing, that is happening, and that's available. If there are any listeners who would like this for your entire organization or for your students or your clients, that's absolutely available as well.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Blied. That is no small feat for anyone who understands what it takes to create a course. I do, and I know it's a lot. It's a lot, let alone branching out and enterprising and all that back end stuff. I mean, it's, yes, more tools now, but it's a whole process, and it takes time to do it right. And I know everything you touch, Dr. Blied, is done with love and care, and I'm sure anyone who takes this will see that. So thank you again for the wonderful work you're doing in this field. And I'll be sure to link up to that in the description, the show notes on the blog. And yeah, wonderful stuff. Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to share this with your audience. This is,
of course.
I'm just so grateful. I'm so humbled and so grateful.
Yeah, well, it means a lot to have you on and to share the work you're doing. And of course, being our resident expert, you're always welcome back on. Share how things are going.
And next time we'll have to do in-person live.
Yes, we were talking about that. And if I wasn't so tight today, I would have, just because we're only like 10 miles apart. Go figure. I ordered a Zoom recorder so we can do a light setup, so I don't have to bring my whole studio with me. Unplug everything. And so I'll bring the Zoom recorder. Maybe I'll use my smartphone, keep it light, keep it fun. And we'll do an in-person recording. That'll be fun. Maybe do a tour of your office there. And for any of our locals watching, listening, kind of see.
That's perfect. And
what a gem you are here in the San Gabriel Valley. So.
Yeah, most people are really surprised when they meet me because I'm 6 feet tall.
Oh, well.
I didn't think you were. I'm like, yeah.
I'm 5'5", so I'll be looking up to.
Oh, okay. We'll just adjust our chair.
There you go. I'll sit on some pillows. That works. Good stuff. Well, thank you, Dr. Blied, as always, for all of your willingness to share and the work you're doing. So I wish you much success with your new course and the launch, and I'm sure it'll be great. So thank you for that.
Bye, everyone.
All right, everyone. You have a great week. Take care.